Chris, I'm so excited to talk to you. I have like at least 35 years worth of questions for you. You've brought us so many amazing films over the years. What can you tell us about the first time Home Alone came into your life?
I was doing I was living in Chicago. I just come off a film that did not do particularly well at the box office or critically. In fact, it died at the box office. So I was staying with my wife's parents in Chicago, and John Hughes and I had the same agent. So John called me, sent me a script for Christmas Vacation. So I was going to do Christmas Vacation, shot second unit for Christmas Vacation. And then I met Chevy Chase, and the long and short of it is we did not hit it off. He didn't treat me very well. And I was down on my luck, and I had everything to lose. I needed that movie. But I had to call John and say, I can't work with this guy. And John understood, and I thought, oh, well, that's the kiss of death. John's never going to want to work with me again because I led him down this road. And 2 weeks later, he sends me the script for Home Alone. And I jumped on it, and I was thankful because even back then, I knew this was a very special movie, So we dove into it, and John and I ended up working together, and we started to make the movie in Chicago.
John Hughes, of course, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, one of the most beloved screenwriters of all time. Such a late great legend. How would you describe sort of your process working together? I mean, you're also a writer. How much back and forth? What can you say about sort of that collaborative process?
Well, I think John wrote the script. Weirdly, John wrote the script in about 2 days. I mean, he wrote it over a weekend. Or on a Thursday and Friday, because I think I got it on a Saturday. Either way, the script was in great shape. So I brought little things to it here and there. I think probably the most important thing I brought to the movie was not only the visual style, the look of the movie, but also I intensified the relationship between, I wanted the film to be more emotional. So I intensified the relationship between Kevin and old man Marley, who lived across the street. So at the very end of the movie, when Kevin walks up to the window and he sees Marley reunited with his granddaughter and son, and they exchange a wave, that to me was the moment that I added. That wasn't in the script. And to me, that really cements the picture emotionally.
Absolutely. It is such every time. It gets you every time. It's such a hard-hitting emotional punch at the end. I've always wondered if you had a backstory, what were old man Marley and his son fighting over? Was it politics?
These days, I'm sure it would be, but that would make Marley on the wrong side of politics potentially. So,
yeah, he was a big George H.W. Bush fan.
Right.
That's were there any other big changes you brought to it? Were there like characters that came or went that you added or left behind?
No, I think I really think I brought casting to the movie, except for Macaulay, who John had in mind the entire time, even though I wanted to see 300 other actors because I felt it was my directorial responsibility. I ended up going with Macaulay because he was such a unique kid. He's incredibly charismatic. He didn't look like he came out of the Hollywood cookie cutter world of film. He didn't look like some kid you see on a TV show. This was a real kid. His ear was a little bent, and he had a funny, cute smile, and he was funny and charming. So he was always on board. But I was a huge Marty Scorsese fan. So I went to NYU. I was taught by the same film professor, Haig Manoogian. So I was first in line to see all of Scorsese's pictures when they came out, and became a huge Joe Pesci fan. And realized that those are incredibly dark pictures, Raging Bull and Goodfellas. Yet at the same time, Pesci's ridiculously funny in the movies. And I thought, this guy has an amazing sense of humor, probably say no. So I was stunned when he said yes. And that was the beginning of trying to find his sidekick. And when we were looking for Marv, I had hired another actor who unfortunately did not have great chemistry with Joe. Initially, we wanted Daniel Stern, but Daniel Stern was too expensive. That's what the studio said. Then we had to pay the other actor, and I begged the studio to, I said to Joe Roth, who was the head of the studio at the time, please let us hire Danny Stern. I mean, I sensed that there's going to be something great between these two. we did a screen test between Stern and Pesci, and they had an amazing amount of chemistry. And then the other role for me that was important was Catherine O'Hara as the mother, because I was a huge Second City TV fan. So I loved John Candy. John and Hughes were friends. So John asked Candy if he would play Gus Polinski. And Catherine O'Hara is somebody who not only I thought was funny, but I thought also had a tremendous amount of emotional sort of warmth and complexity. And Kevin's mother needed that. So that was another great moment when she said she'd do the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, all around incredible cast. Do you remember meeting Macaulay for the first time and sort of like, where his head was about to lead this film at such a young age?
I think Macaulay was like most of the kids that age I've worked with whose parents sort of, nudged them into the industry a little bit. They want to be there. Sometimes they don't want to be there. I'd seen Mac and Uncle Buck, and I thought he was hilarious. It was a short scene with John Candy. And I met him and his father at my New York apartment at the time when I was living in New York. And we just sat at a table and we read a couple of scenes, and he was just extraordinarily charming. And I thought, this kid is a movie star. He's a real movie star. And
of course, there's another Culkin brother in there as well. We can't forget Kieran, who steals a moment or two as the Pepsi loving Fuller. The look he gives Mac that moment after that. That's just like, you're like, okay, it makes sense that he became such a great actor, because he had it. Were the Culkins like, hey, if you like Mac, check out our other son as well? Was that a package deal?
I don't think it was a package deal, but I think for some reason, Kieran came to a rehearsal we were having at the time, and he just had that, he had the look that he had in the movie. And then when we put the glasses on him, he became Fuller. So it was an acting family. I think the father was an actor. The father, I remember correctly, his sister was Bonnie Bedelia. So there were a lot of good actors in that family. And Kieran has turned into quite the actor, on Succession.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the dynamic like between Mac and then Joe and Daniel on set? I mean, did they do anything to sort of antagonize each other behind the scenes?
No. They actually spent very little time together. So we only had Mac for a few hours at night and a few hours during the day. So in the scenes where they are together, Danny and Joe would help Mac out a little bit, sometimes with his lines, if I were doing a 3-shot. Then when it was time for them to leave the set, I would have to be off camera performing with Macaulay, because he was very new to the industry. And it's no secret that I would just get him, I would basically, which was what you don't do with actors like Joe Pesci, is give them a line reading. So with Macaulay, I would give him line reading after line reading until we had about 25 versions of that line. So that was my process with him. Then when he went home at night, and I'd have to be on camera for Joe and Danny, and I'd have to get on my knees and pretend I was Macaulay. And I didn't have to give them line readings, but that's how the process worked. They were rarely together.
Okay. What were the most challenging scenes for you guys to capture? I gotta imagine that the stunts have to be up there.
The stunts, without a doubt. We were shooting, it was below zero weather in Chicago. It was brutal at night. Technology for ski jackets wasn't as accomplished as it is 30 years down the road. And so it was a little colder. And the stuntmen, there were no wires. We didn't use wires. We didn't use visual effects. So the stuntmen were out there really kicking their own asses. And basically, we would shoot a stunt, someone falling down the stairs, someone getting hit with a paint can, landing on a hardwood floor. I'd yell, cut, total silence. Everybody, the crew thought he's dead because he wasn't moving. And I'll go up to the actor. It's happened time and time again on every stunt. You guys, you okay? And Troy would get up and he'd say, yeah, I'm fine. You want to do it again? And then we would go back to the monitor, watch the scene, and everyone would laugh hysterically. So essentially, it wasn't funny when we were shooting live, when you saw it in person. It was only when you knew that everyone was safe and sound that we could breathe a sigh of relief.
Did you film all those stunts back to back?
No. They had to be carefully prepared. And each scene was shot as a scene. So if Joe Pesci is walking up the stairs to go to the house, we would shoot Joe's section, stop, almost shoot it in chronological order, shoot the stunt, and then continue with Joe.
I read that.
We never knew where anybody was going to land. We had a sense, but without strings, without strings and, all of that nonsense, we had no idea.
Who did Macaulay's stunts?
A little person, a guy named Larry. So who was Macaulay's size and was a tough guy and would do all of those, all of his stunts. Mm-hmm. I think if you freeze frame bits of the movie, you can see that it's Larry.
I know what I'm doing tonight. That's amazing. I read that Chris Farley auditioned for Santa Claus. Is this true? Do you remember this?
It was, it was an 7:30 on a Saturday morning. Chris, who I knew from New York, always thought he was a hilarious guy and a real sweetheart of a guy, came in, decided he was just going to hang out in Chicago and hit every bar in Chicago before he came to the audition. So poor Chris was not particularly prepared for that audition, and he would have been great in the role. I love the guy who ended up playing him, but really, yeah, it's and then I had seen Chris again years afterwards. We always see each other, but we never talked about that audition.
No. Was it a matter of him blowing the audition, or more of a matter of going like, we don't know if we can work with this guy if this is how he's going to show up?
Well, he didn't blow the audition. Let's just say he had a few drinks.
Yeah, gotcha. One of my all-time favorite fun facts about Home Alone, especially because it seems like people are still discovering this to this day. Like every once in a while, you see a tweet of amazement pop up. Angels with Filthy Souls, the black and white gangster movie that famously makes a couple appearances, is not a real movie. Not everyone knows that. Do you find that people are continually surprised to hear this?
I just heard that last week Seth Rogen and Chris Evans thought it was a real movie. I don't know when they found out it wasn't, but someone told me that. But yeah, I think the thing about Home Alone is that it's the only movie, it was the last movie to use this process called carbon arc lighting. Now, carbon arc lighting is what they used in Technicolor films in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s to give warm, rich, vibrant colors. Also used in black and white to give those really intense blacks and whites. And that's what we used on Angels. They're basically lights where you take a piece of charcoal this big, put it in the light, and you light it, and that's what fuels the light. And it creates a look that you haven't seen in 30 years. We were the last movie to use them, and in a sense, that's why Home Alone has that richness of color and warmth. And it's also why Angels with Filthy Souls looks like it was shot in 1945.
Yeah, like I mentioned, such a great ensemble. I did want to ask you about one other actor in particular, the late great John Candy, who had a small role as Polka King Gus Polinski. Do you have any favorite memories of John you can share with us?
Yeah, John was the greatest. I always talk about the three greatest actors I've ever worked with are John Candy, Robin Williams, and Kurt Russell. And really, I got to say that John agreed to do a day's work on the picture. He was paid scale, which is ridiculous if you think about the success of Home Alone. Yeah. So that one day turned into a 23-and-a-half-hour day. And we shot all of John's scenes in that one day. I don't think we could do that today. The unions would shut us down. But John Hughes was beloved in Chicago, so the union guys supported him, and we shot all of those scenes. The great thing about working with John, he would do a scripted take, and then he was an amazing improviser. So most of his scenes in the movie are improvised, except for the moments of plot. But he tells that entire story in the back of the truck about being trapped in a funeral parlor at night. I'm watching that. It's like 5:30 in the morning, and all of the crew is doubled over with laughter. I don't know how Catherine O'Hara kept a straight face.
That is amazing. Of course, you guys made a sequel 2 years later, Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. At what point did that become a plan? I mean, was that in the back of your minds when you knew that this film was sort of working out? Was it like opening weekend when you saw those first box office receipts come in? When did you decide you'd do a follow-up?
It was probably, the extraordinary thing about Home Alone is that, which doesn't happen, well, it certainly doesn't happen today since movie theaters are closed, but the movie was #1 for like 14 weeks in a row, which showed us this has longevity. People just wanted, and theaters were smaller. So you didn't pack a theater with 2,600 people, it was 900 people. So sometimes you couldn't get in. You had to wait till the next weekend to go. So that was amazing. And that's what that basically, after those 14 weeks ended, maybe in the midst of them, week 12 or 13, the studio called and said, we want a sequel.
One of the things that sequel, of course, has become most famous for is a cameo made by a certain businessman turned reality TV star turned president. What was your experience like with Donald Trump?
It's very similar to what's going on today. I mean, we wanted to shoot in the Plaza Hotel. We had to shoot in the Plaza Hotel. A large number of the movie takes place in the Plaza Hotel. Every other location in New York, you pay a location fee. You get to use the location. So we approached the Plaza. The owner of the hotel is not the person who usually deals with this. Let me just be clear. It's someone who's a manager. Someone deals with it. We got wind back that the only way we could get into the Plaza Hotel was if Donald Trump had a cameo in the movie. Mm-hmm. And I was like, are you kidding me? He said, no, he wants a cameo. He wants a line. So we devised this thing because we needed to shoot in the Plaza because my producers were like, look, you can cut it. We'll shoot it and we'll cut it later. Well, this is the only way we can get in the Plaza. So we shot the scene and we previewed the movie for the first time in Chicago. And when that moment came up, it was the loudest laughter and cheers. Get this, cheers back in 1992 when they saw him. Weird moment. Particularly when you, so anyway, what I'm saying is why it compares to what's going on today is he still wouldn't leave his house. So, I mean, he still refused to let us inside. It's very weird.
Yeah, I think it was Matt Damon who said a couple of years ago, I think the same thing happened with Son of a Woman. It was like, that was his thing. If you were to shoot on his property, he had to be in the movie. I think you even had to say his name was like one of the mandates, I think. And then and apparently that happened and he would just be cut out of the movie. But that's amazing to hear why you guys ended up keeping him in.
It was a high point literally a high point for the audience. I mean, no one had a crystal ball. They couldn't know what was going to happen today.
Right. You have a new film on the way. It is another holiday movie, The Christmas Chronicles 2, a follow-up to 2018's Christmas Chronicles. Are you a Christmas junkie or are you a big Christmas guy?
No. It's not a Christmas junkie really. It's the fact that I produced the first Christmas Chronicles. It was successful. I struck up a really close friendship with Kurt Russell and we wanted to work together. And I was intrigued. And when a guy plays Santa Claus, most of the time it's not taken seriously. Kurt Russell plays Santa Claus. He writes 170 pages about the guy's backstory, the mythology. That is an actor's commitment. He is committed to this role in a way that you would expect De Niro to be committed to Jake, LaMotta. It's Kurt's. And when you see that kind of passion in an actor to play a role that some people don't take seriously, you realize I want to go there because we had no desire to make a film that was look, I'll take the blame. Home Alone 2 was basically a remake of Home Alone 1. Let's face it. I like Home Alone 2, but it's a remake. Stunts are funny. But this movie, we wanted to go to places we didn't go in the first movie. First movie was basically a remake of my first film, Adventures in Babysitting, with Santa Claus, A Night on the Town in Chicago with Santa. This film digs into the mythology of Santa Claus and Santa's village in a way that I don't think has ever been done. We treated it, we sound like Christmas nerds, but we treated it like Harry Potter, and that's why Santa's Village is probably the biggest set I've ever worked on. And it's bigger than the Great Hall in the first Potter film. And that's what I wanted to give the audience, a Santa's Village that people, and a Santa Claus that people could take seriously. Santa Claus who was tough, who was charming, who was funny. It was all of interest to me because I'd never seen that particular Santa Claus before.
Yeah. And I just want to point out I've had the privilege of visiting a few film sets and I was in the Great Hall over there in the UK, and that was easily the most impressive film set I've ever been on. So I can only imagine this one. But yeah, I remember seeing Kurt, seeing the first poster or hearing that he had been cast as Santa Claus, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting choice. Like let me process that. But he is so good. He's so good, and I think because it feels like a fresh twist on Santa. Like he's got a nice edge to him. Obviously, some humor. There's maybe a little bit of Elvis in there.
Right.
But it was amazing what you said about sort of like what he brings to the backstory. Is that do you see that as sort of a passion about this particular role, or does Kurt do that every time from what you
No, it's this particular role. He said to me, I want to, and I don't believe this, but he said, I want to walk into the sunset, this being the last role I play. And he wants to continue doing it. He is committed to, deep down into his soul, he's committed to this role. And that means 8 weeks growing the beard with a little additional flourishes. That means, working with the script every night before we shoot with me. I mean, it's an intense commitment, and he takes it very seriously.
Wow. And of course, there was a surprise cameo at the end of the first movie with Goldie Hawn turning up at the end and as Mrs. Claus, which was so well played. And of course, Kurt and Goldie are married in real life, one of the coolest couples I think in this business. How excited were they about getting to work together for a whole film together? And what is that dynamic like on set? That's got to be fun.
Well, they've got a tremendous, obviously, from living together for so many years, they've got a tremendous amount of chemistry just because they're always together. And when you get them on a set, that chemistry continues to, fuse with each of them. But the interesting thing is, everybody's like, Goldie Hawn, she's going to be so funny. Aren't you excited? I said, I'm not interested in that. I think Goldie's a comedic legend, but I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the Goldie Hawn, the great actress. And I want Mrs. Claus not to be slapsticky and silly. I want Mrs. Claus to have a strength about her. I want her to be a strong woman. Remember, she built Santa's Village. She designed it. She's the brains behind the business. It really should be called Mrs. Claus's Village. And I believe, that there's a real sense of strength. She's a pioneer woman. And that's what I love about her portrayal of it,
Mm-hmm. And you also add Julian Dennison to the mix, who was so fantastic in a movie called Hunt for the Wilder People. I don't have this in front of me. I hope I got that right. Yep. Clearly a budding star. Is that how you guys discovered him in that film?
That and I think Deadpool too.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And he said, I wanted to work with Julian because he has an intense emotional complexity about him. There's a real deep soul in that kid. And I saw that, and that's what this character needed for Christmas Chronicles too. And I just haven't seen another kid like him in a long time who can reach that deep, and I felt he was perfect for this role.
It feels like there's like 5 or 6 Christmas movies, maybe a few more. I feel like Home Alone would probably be on a short list that audiences tend to watch religiously. And then there's like all of the rest of the Christmas movies that have ever been made. It's rare that a contemporary one sort of passes that threshold. The first movie was obviously very popular, thus the sequel. But in general, is that more daunting then to set out to make a contemporary Christmas classic?
Not when we were, at least for Christmas Chronicles, we knew the story could go deeper. We could have easily, like I said, remade the first movie and done a night with Santa Claus in New York City or a night with Santa Claus in Italy. I don't know. But we decided to open up the mythology and make it much bigger. And that's what was appealing to me. Because to be quite honest, you don't get to make a movie like this if you're releasing theatrically, because no one wants to spend the kind of money to make a movie that's not based either on a comic book or an old Disney animated cartoon. So to me, it's a way to continue. Netflix is certainly a way for me to continue to make original large scale movies, whether it's Christmas Chronicles or not. They give you that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Christmas movies or non-Christmas movies, that's what I want to ask you. Yeah. Gremlins. We have this debate with Die Hard all the time, but it's also appropriate to wonder about Gremlins. Is Gremlins a Christmas movie? Was that part of the intent?
Yeah, the goal for me, the reason I'm fascinated by Christmas is I'm fascinated because it's a time of year when people are at their most emotional and happiest. Yet there's a whole other side of the population that's incredibly depressed, potentially out of work, particularly this year. So you take that and you set it against the backdrop of, you know, back in the day, something like Gremlins. And that's an interesting stew to me. You know, when people should be celebrating with their families, these ridiculously evil monsters are terrorizing the town and killing everyone. That is fascinating. Same with Home Alone. A kid is left home alone, and his worst nightmare happens. He's facing these two burglars.
I mean, do you think you might have, you know, scared a few kids away from Christmas with those Gremlins, and also, you know, like Phoebe Cates's horrifying Dad is Santa Claus story?
Studio almost made us cut that initially, but it was Joe Dante and I's favorite scene in the movie.
That was an urban legend, right? Was that based on an urban legend?
No, it was based on a. Do you remember a cartoonist named Gahan Wilson?
I don't think so. No.
You'd have to go through all of his early dark. He used to do cartoons for National Lampoon, and there's a cartoon of a guy in a skeleton in a Santa Claus suit as a skeleton in the chimney. And I don't remember the punchline, but it's like, oh, so that's what happened to Uncle Harry. So that inspired me.
But you said that the studio wanted you guys to cut that scene. Did you have to fight for that one?
After the first preview, yeah, they wanted us to cut the scene. But Joe Dante and Steven Spielberg, I didn't have much say at the time. I was just the screenwriter. And by that, I mean, it was only my second movie. But Joe and Steven, you know, talk some sense into them.
I love it. Are you still working on a Gremlins 3? Is that still in the realm of possibility?
Still working on it. Still kind of trying to figure it out.
And finally, just speaking of holidays in general, how do you feel about the fact that every October on what was traditionally Christopher Columbus Day, but some states now recognize as Indigenous Peoples Day, some fans choose to celebrate you, calling it Chris Columbus Day?
I'm flattered by that. You know, I felt irresponsible. This year it finally hit me. I felt so irresponsible continuing to name my production company 1492 Pictures. So we changed our name this year to 26th Street Pictures. I unfortunately was given this name at birth, so I can't change it. It's not like I went to Hollywood and said, I want to be Chris Columbus. So I'm stuck with it. But the further I can move myself away from the original Christopher Columbus would be a good thing. I mean, I would hate to be Don Trump right now. A Don Trump film would not be a good thing.